And I also remember how sometimes when I was working with the turtle and it was raining, when the drops would fall on the turtle's back, it would flash blue. And I was so like, wow,
That's
this is
amazing.
amazing. This is so beautiful. And I will never forget that feeling of how amazing is nature? How beautiful is this? What am I seeing? And it was glowing blue, and it was just a fantastic sight. And I guess that was my favorite part, but also just being surrounded by life, like what I already mentioned. It was so healing for me, and I just felt so like in place, and I felt so alive, and I felt like this is what the world is. Like, this is a world that I like. This is a world that I want to be in. I prefer this than being on the subway every day, than being, in the city. I love the city, but I prefer this so much more.
Hello, lovely ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Seeds of Consciousness podcast. Today, I have a very special quarantine edition episode with my dear friend, Melina Damien. Since we couldn't be together, I'm having her on Skype right now. And I met her through this internship that we both did at our university. And that was about 2 years ago. It was, I don't know about you, Melina, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. When I explain that experience to people, I call it biology boot camp, because that's basically what it was. So we're going to get into that, just reminisce about our time there, what we did, what we learned, how we've changed since coming back, and all that fun stuff. So first off, I want to give the floor to you, Melina. Introduce yourself. Tell us what you did there in Costa Rica, and I guess, well, maybe just start off with like introducing the organization that we worked at, what they're about, and then what your role was in that place.
Yeah, for sure. So, thank you for having me, Kat. I'm very excited to be on your podcast. So yes, my name is Melina Damien. I went to the same university that Kat went to, York University, and through an internship that the program that I was studying had, so I did a master's in environmental studies, I ended up in the same place as Kat, and we went to Costa Rica to a station called Caño Palma Biological Station, which is hosted by COTERC. So COTERC stands for the Canadian Organization for Tropical Education and Rainforest Conservation. So they're a Canadian-based organization that operates there in Costa Rica, and they carry a number of conservation projects, including marine turtle monitoring, mammal monitoring. Also, they do work with caiman conservation, macaw, snakes, and they do environmental education. So I traveled there as the marine turtle intern, and yes, that's how I met Kat.
Yeah. So, like she said, we found that organization through York University. They have a summer internship program, and there's a lot of different organizations. We obviously chose the one about environmental conservation because that's what we were studying. She was studying environmental studies, whereas I was studying biology, ecology specifically at the other campus, Glendon. And then we went there. I was hired as the mammal monitoring technician. So what I was doing was basically working during the day. There was multiple different elements to it that I was doing. I would be either some mornings on the beach, assessing the status of turtle nests, or I would be in the jungle looking for mammal tracks, or I would be on the water kayaking looking for otter poop on the sides of the canals. So that's a basic rundown of what I was doing. What were you doing as a marine turtle technician there?
So as a marine turtle intern, I was joining the night patrols and morning patrols. So what the organization does is they monitor marine turtles at night. So there were usually two shifts from, well, it depended on the amount of people that there were, but sometimes it would be from 8 to 2 and then from 10 to 4.
And she's talking about 8 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Or 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And if we didn't have enough people, it would be from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. And sometimes it would go longer because the turtles would nest at around like 2:30. So I remember there was a time that we went out from 9 p.m. until about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. And there were a couple times that we saw the sunrise. So yes, we were going out. So we were doing this beach patrols 6 days a week. It's important to notice that we worked like an insane amount of hours.
It was not a vacation by any stretch of the imagination. We were isolated on this little research base on the side of the canal at like the northwest province of Tortuguero. Like the closest village of 400 people was like a short kayak ride across the canal. So there wasn't really much to do other than work and try to get as much sleep as possible in the meantime. So what were you doing with the turtles on the beach?
So the idea was to monitor the beach. So the beach was around 3 miles long, and we had to go from the start to the end, and then from the end to the middle, to the middle to the end, and from the end to the start. So we had to be outside regardless of the amount of turtles that we would see in a given night. We still had to be outside during the same amount of time. So sometimes there were a lot of nights, especially at the beginning of June, where we didn't have any activity. 2 or 3 weeks I remember went by and we didn't see a single turtle. But still we had to be outside guarding, patrolling the beach. So what we were doing when it picked up and turtles started coming out more often, I think in the middle of June, what we would do was, first of all, when we saw the turtle tracks, we would follow the tracks to try to see if a turtle was still there or if it came down. And we would record the amount of tracks that we saw that night. Also, if we had the luck to encounter the turtle, we would assess its body health. And so if she was just starting to nest, we counted the eggs. So we opened the hole, and we did this without any light, with the minimal disturbance, because they couldn't know that we were there. Otherwise they would be freaked out and then they go back to the sea, and that's not the idea. So whenever we encounter a turtle that was about to nest, one of us would start digging a hole behind her to put our hand underneath her cloaca, and then with the other hand that was outside, we would count the amount of eggs. And they would put from 100 to 150 nests, depending on the turtle, depending on the species. And then after that, we would do body health. We would check their eyes, their carapace,
their shell.
The shell. What else did we do? We would measure them too, just to see how big they were. There were a number of things that we would note down in the journal. Now you're making me remember.
It's been a while. It's like this was 2 years ago, so even for me, like I'm a bit rusty on details. But basically, what she's talking about is like every night they had to patrol the beach because it was a very popular site for nesting of several species of turtle, and it was important that our research presence was on the beach because the locals in the area really liked to, dig up the freshly laid eggs and either consume them themselves or sell them to others. There was a really large poaching presence, and our presence on that beach really helped deter these people from doing their act. Not only did they steal the eggs, sometimes they stole the turtles themselves and killed them and sold the flesh on the black market. So it was a very common thing, and our approach was very hands off. We would never, target any individuals or say anything to the poachers. our presence was enough because it is a very small community. Everyone knows each other. It's only 400 people on this little stretch of land on a canal. Like, you know who everyone is. So most people would try to stay away from the people that are on the beach patrolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, she was doing that mostly at night. It's interesting because we kind of had opposite schedules and we didn't really spend that much time together because she was working at night and I would work mainly during the day. I would start my shifts at like 5 a.m. And by 6, we would be out either, like I said, in the jungle looking for mammal tracks, which we did basically to understand what kind of mammals were in the location and also like how many of them there were. So that data was really important to have an overall understanding of the species in the area, not only their richness, but also their abundance, what kind and how many, and of what proportion of each species. For the otter studies, the reason why we were looking for their poop was because it's a great indicator of how many otters are in the area. Otters are really elusive creatures. They don't really come out when there's people around. So it's really hard to see them physically, but their poop along the canals helps us determine their presence and gives us more ideas of, you know, the kind of logs that they mark. They do that to, you know, mark their territory and stuff like that. And then during the day when Melina was tired from her night shift, me and some other day workers would go on the beach for the morning patrol. And during that time, basically, we just made sure that whatever they were doing during night patrol had been, you know, covered up. So we obviously didn't want the poachers or anyone else to know where exactly the nests were. We knew where the nests were because we triangulated the nests and had all that data. But the locals didn't, if we were able to just, you know, hide the tracks in the sand, kind of wash them away and fill these holes, which was not an easy task. Melina, you definitely agree with me. These holes are huge and deep. How was that process? Like, would you say that your job was very labor intensive?
It was, yeah. And so before going into that, I just wanted to clarify for the viewers what triangulating means.
Yeah.
Because it was a hard process to understand. So what we basically did, what triangulation meant is that wherever we found a nest, we would pinpoint the 3 nearest objects. Well, not objects, but trees. It would most likely be trees most of the times. And then we would write down how far the nest was from tree A, tree B, and tree C. And then that way we would measure and find the exact location. So yes, that was our attempt to try to guise the nests. However, poachers are so good at doing what they do, and they know so well the area that a lot of the times our work was not enough to hide the nests. But yeah, that's what triangulation means. And yes, I would say it was a very labor intensive job because, as Kat mentioned, the holes. So these turtles, just to give you an idea, they are like the size of a dining table.
No joke. There's actually no exaggeration.
Yeah. So they're huge, and some of them make a huge mess when they nest. And the idea was to disguise all of this mess and disguise their tracks. And some of them come out of the water, they find the nest, and then they go back. But some of them come out of the water and search for a while. So that means their tracks can cover a wide area. So you had to cover all that with your hands and with your sticks. You had to disguise it to make it look like nothing happened.
And the disguising process is so labor intensive. Like, we were basically on our hands and knees whooshing the sand, trying to flatten everything so you don't see any indentations or anything. But they were very particular with the way that we did things. Like, I don't know about you, but I got a lot of flack for my technique. I used to do this and they're like, no, this is all wrong. You have to go like this and you got to put your whole body into it. And these tracks can like run for like hundreds of meters. Like, some of these turtles, they take their sweet time trying to find the perfect nest. They'll go up and down the beach, and you're there in the morning and night, just on your hands and knees, crawling across 400 meters, just doing this.
Yeah.
It's hard because there's multiple nests and tracks in a night, if it's a good night.
Yeah, so good nights were awesome for our conservation goals, but at the same time, that meant that we would be out there for way longer, or even in the mornings too, right? When morning patrols. So when you, for example, when you found a nest at the very end of the beach, that meant that you were going to be there for a while. So because you couldn't go home until you disguise them all. You can't just say, okay, my shift is over, I'm going back. You had to be out there and complete the work. So yeah, and I remember what you were saying about disguising. Yeah, I also, I was told I was trying to use a stick to make it look more uniform, and they said no, you have to use your hands. So you had to like be on the floor, like you said, because using a stick is easier, right? But no, you had to use your hands, your whole body to make it look more uniform.
And if you encountered a turtle while she was nesting, you had to stay there during the entire time. And why was it crucial to stay with the turtle?
Because poachers could come and take her and kill her. So we had to be there with her just to, in case there was any poacher around, just to let them know, like, this is our turtle kind of thing. And the same thing would happen otherwise. I never experienced it, but the protocol was that if we encounter a group of poachers with a turtle, we would not interfere. As Kat mentioned, we wouldn't confront the poachers. Our approach was very hands-off, that it was their turtle kind of thing. So that's why it required us to stay with the turtles until the very end. And some of them nested very fast, and it was great. It was very efficient. We would cover the nest, and then we would keep going. But I remember there was a turtle that took 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yes.
To lay how many eggs?
I can't remember how many eggs she had, but she just didn't like the places that she was picking. She would pick one, start digging, and then be like, nope, this is not good, and then move, and then come back, and then move again, and dig another hole, and yeah, it could be very, very long process. And you know, that's not a good thing for us, because that means the more time we spend with this turtle, the less opportunities we had to protect potentially other turtles that were coming up to nest that night. So
yeah, you were working with really small teams, right? Like how many people a night went out with you?
So sometimes it would be just 3 of us at night because there weren't enough people. Sometimes if we were lucky, we had 2 teams of 3 people each. And sometimes when there were a lot of people, we had 4 people in a team, but still, and it's not like your team could divide, because that wasn't an option at all because of safety reasons. So you couldn't just say, okay, I'm going to stay with the turtle. You
guys go ahead.
You guys go ahead. You can't do that. So we all had to stick together, and yeah.
And talk about, like I heard that, you know, part of the reason why we needed to protect them was because when these turtles are laying eggs, it's kind of like they like go into kind of this trance. Like they don't really protect themselves, right? They just like keep going and going, right?
Oh, I actually didn't know that. What I heard from one of our researchers, it's that they are, and I don't know if I agree with this, but she used to say that turtles are not very smart. They are very, I guess, I don't know if the word is pragmatic, but I guess it's what you're saying. It's like
more of
awareness.
Yeah, it's like an automatic process kind of thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, that may have played a factor into why we wouldn't just keep going. But also we had to stay until the very end to be able to measure the turtle and do the body check. You couldn't do the body check before she nested because you would spook her. So we had to wait for her to lay her eggs and then do the body assessment, make sure everything was okay. Oh, the most important part, we had to tag the turtle. I forgot that. I guess my memory tried to get rid of it.
I hope you didn't forget while you were there with the turtles.
No, I didn't. And it was a very hard thing to do. That's why maybe I don't like remembering that because it was extremely hard task to do. You had to, so after she nested, you had to first, so, okay, let me recap. After she nested, she starts disguising her nest. Mm-hmm. So that means she starts moving with her flippers very, very strong, and she heats her.
Throwing all the sand around, right?
Yeah, yeah. So while she does that, she takes a couple breaks to breathe. And when she breathes and she's like having a break, you go and check her flippers for any tags that she may have. So tags are like sort of the equivalent of earrings for people. So these were tags that were in their flippers that they really don't hurt them unless you put them wrong or unless there's something growing, something gets attached in it, or yeah. So they would have a number, and then we would record the number to make sure to keep track of all the turtles. And after, if they had a number, that was great. But if they didn't, you had to tag them. And that was a very hard thing for me to do because you need to be really strong in order to not hurt the turtle. So you have to, it's very, like their skin is extremely thick and you have to use a lot of force to be able to tag her without ripping her skin. And I just felt like I was hurting them for some reason. So I wouldn't apply so much force and the tag wouldn't go in properly. So I had to do it again. And then they obviously, they don't like it because they can feel it. Yeah. They don't or anything, but they can feel it. Yeah. So yeah, that was a very important task that we had. That's also why we couldn't just keep going. We had to stay there until the very end. And we couldn't tag them before nesting again because they would get freaked out because obviously by that time, after they are nesting, they obviously know that you're there because you're touching them, you're measuring them, you're checking them, you're tagging them, and they don't like that.
Yeah. So why was it important to tag these turtles?
Because it's the only way to keep a track of the population numbers. So there was a time that, for example, I remember I tagged a turtle on August 8th, something like that. Mm-hmm. And in the middle it was mile 1 maybe out of 3. Mm-hmm. And then maybe 7 days later, this same turtle came back when I was there and she nested again in around the same place. And I remember her because I remember the numbers. So it's just tagging them. It's a way to know which one is coming back, which one is coming from the adjacent beach, which one is new. Mm-hmm. So it's extremely important. It's the base of the conservation project to tag the turtles.
Yeah, so tagging really allows us to have a record of individual turtles, their patterns, their migratory behavior, because we are able to share this information with other researchers around the world because sea turtles are very migratory, right? So it just really helps us gain a bigger perspective of their patterns of movements and also see whether the same turtles come back to the same beach year after year to nest. Because I believe that wherever a turtle has, arisen from the sand, like whatever location it was nested in initially, like where it was born, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. That's the kind of location that they keep coming back to, right?
Yeah, so that's called nest fidelity, and that's unique. It's not unique. There are many other species that have that trait, but marine turtles have nest fidelity. So they don't necessarily have to come back to the exact same spot, but to the same area. So for example, the beach where we were working at called Playa Norte, we had some turtles coming from the beach in Tortuguero, which was just a couple miles south or north. I can't remember. Yeah. But it was, like the adjacent village and beach. So, yeah.
So that is really interesting. It's really great that you had a lot of that hands-on experience. I, on the other hand, did not. I was more focused on just finding tracks. I didn't really get to see the animals that much, which sometimes was a good thing because there were some dangerous animals in that jungle. And you would think it's the jaguars, but no, it's the peccaries that you do not want to encounter when you're working. I have a very traumatizing story actually about that, but I'll save that for a little bit later. What I did want to discuss about this, I don't know. I guess it's like there wasn't really much to what I was doing. I literally just walked around a lot or kayaked around and just collected just information on tracks like GPS location, identifying the animal. If it was an otter, I would like figure out how old the poop was to see when that animal was last in the area, or you could tell what they ate from the poop because they have like a lot of scales, or sometimes you'll see like a crab arm in there. So it really wasn't that animal oriented, I would say, but it was still a really interesting experience. Like I really wanted to go there because Costa Rica is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. There's so many animals in such a small place. The canal that we were on was absolutely beautiful. Like it's a completely different world from the one that we live in here, in the city in Toronto, Canada. And honestly, because it was so different, I don't know about you, Melina, but it was so hard for me to just adapt to that situation. Like I'm a city girl, born and raised. Like I hadn't even been camping before I went into the jungle. So it was like I was plunging in. I have never done that much manual work in my life. So it was really hard for me to adjust. Like I honestly wanted to leave every single day I was there. And that feeling didn't leave me until I literally left after 3 months. I honestly did not think that I would last 3 months, and neither did the people running the station. I remember, I think the part that I really disliked about my job was that the jungle was very flooded. Like we went during the rainy season, so it was constantly raining. And I didn't realize this about myself, but I really don't like being wet. Like not like I like swimming and stuff, but like when you wake up at 5 a.m., it's still dark and pouring rain. And the moment that you leave the dorms to try to go to the kitchen, which is like in a different building, there's no corridor or anything, your underwear is going to get wet. And nothing sours your mood more than wet underwear first thing in the morning, or wet socks. Like I used to play, because I'm a cynical girl, I used to play a game with the couple of people that were with me in the jungle with our guide. It was, how long will it take for my socks to get wet? The last person with dry socks wins. And honestly, what do you win? Not really much, because your socks ended up getting wet either way. And that was hard because like, this is not just like a little bit of water. Like sometimes it was up to my thigh. And in those cases, I would play the game of how long will it take until my other underwear gets wet. So it was tough because the jungle, like even though Manuel, the mammal guide, he had a machete with him. He guided us. We had like, it's not like we walked aimlessly in the jungle. We had direct trails that we visited in different little forested areas constantly. So we did have a defined path, but it wasn't one of those paths you see like in parks or nature trails here. It's very rugged, and there's things poking out. There's mud that like you just constantly get stuck in or slip and slide in. Like it was tough navigating that terrain, and I'm a very clumsy person. I remember the first time I was in the jungle, like I fell on my ass, got wet. I was in the worst mood possible. I like ran into this like stick, and I had this huge bruise on my thigh. The mosquitoes are terrible. Like, I guess I just have really sweet blood because over here, but it doesn't make sense because over here, mosquitoes don't bite me, but over there, it's like they can smell that I'm a foreigner. And I was just a buffet. I remember I had over 200 mosquito bites just on one leg. My calf was literally this swollen, thick mass. It was just terrible. So I found it really difficult to adjust to that environment. I don't know about you. How was it for you, Melina?
I actually had a different experience. Mm-hmm. And I think, I think it's admirable that you went completely from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never camped. I didn't know that. Yeah, I had like actually camped a couple of times before, and that obviously like helps, getting you a little bit of experience. So yeah, I guess I would have had a different opinion if I was in your shoes. But I had camped a couple of times before.
And you're from Venezuela, right? So you're familiar with that kind of tropical environment.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that helped a lot too. Yeah, the nature in Costa Rica is very similar to what you'd see in Venezuela. So yeah, I was familiar. I wasn't bothered by the mosquitoes. I didn't have a hard time adjusting, and actually of course, I encountered other challenges, but not really adjusting. I just remember that when I came back, because there was so much life where we were staying, you would go to the kitchen and then you would encounter either, monkeys or spiders or birds or toucans. And it was just so beautiful and so full of life. And I remember when I came back to Toronto, I would look at the trees and I would be like, wow, like I feel the emptiness, and it really hit me because there's not a lot of life here. Not to say it's not beautiful. Toronto is beautiful, but it's just so different from the experience that you would have in the middle of a jungle, literally in Costa Rica. So that's something that I really, really miss, having that biodiversity intensely, live in the same space as you are.
Yeah.
So
everything is so lush and green. It's funny that you mentioned the monkeys, because we actually had 2 species of monkeys that would come on or hang around the trees in the base. So I kind of considered them like the squirrels of the tropics, because you wouldn't really see that many squirrels, but there were always monkeys hanging out in the trees. We had some fruiting trees in the middle of the property, so that's where you would mostly see the white-faced capuchins. And then there were spider monkeys that hung out in the higher canopy surrounding the vase. And then, of course, there were the howler monkeys, which are the most noisiest of the bunch. And they would hang out in the trees right above the dorms, which for you especially was really tough because you're trying to get sleep during the day and they're literally howling. If you've never heard a howler monkey, you can hear its voice from 5 kilometers away. Yeah. So when it's right underneath you,
but I love them. Like that was something I loved. But I want to go back to the topic of rain, because that was a big thing for me too. So yeah, I also had a thing with rain. I had, I guess, mixed feelings and in terms of the experience, I had different occasions in which I hated it and different occasions in which I felt so alive because of the rain. So starting by the good one, I remember that, in the city, you don't really get wet at all. Because if it's raining, you just have an umbrella and then that's it. And then you jump into the bus and then, so you don't, like, I had never experienced the rain like I did in Costa Rica. And I remember feeling so alive by it, because I remember the rain was just touching me and I was completely soaked, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like I love this. And I don't know, there was a moment like a wow moment that I just felt like how something so common was always, was never part of my life in this way. So I do remember feeling so alive and grateful to feel the rain at one point. However, there was a season, there was a month, I think the very first month we got there, I think that very rainy, heavy season. And like Kat is saying, she had to get up at 4 a.m. and then leave at 5, and then it was pouring rain. For us, it would be kind of the opposite at night. So the problem with the rain at night, and that is actually the scariest thing, I think that was the hardest thing for me, was the thunderstorms. Because when you are out in the beach, there's nothing covering you. There's nothing, absolutely nothing protecting you. We had a protocol, and the protocol was, if you're listening to the thunders and there is less than 5 seconds between each thunder, that means the storm is too close, so you have to take cover. So I remember we would listen to a thunder and then count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, but then a lot of the times, to me, they just felt like so loud and so close, but there were more than 5 seconds in between each thunder, so it wasn't enough to make us go take shelter as per the protocol. But that still scared me so much. Like I really felt, and many times I felt like I was going to die struck by a lightning.
Yeah.
And
and you would see it on the horizon, like just slamming. You'd see thunderbolts in the water.
Yeah. But like the research station has done that work for so long that I just ended up trusting them, and I said, okay, if it's not less than 5 seconds, then we're fine. Even though you can hear it so close to you, then I just like ended up trusting them, and that's what helped me get through it. But yeah, it wasn't fun to be out at night for many hours, because these like thunderstorms, it doesn't rain for just like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It can rain for 3 hours straight.
Heavy.
Pouring, yes, heavy rain, pouring rain. And you're out there, in your break trying to eat a snack. So I would eat a boiled egg, and everything was wet. Absolutely everything is wet. Not just yourself, but your snack too.
That's the worst.
Yeah, and out there in the beach, there's nowhere you can hide or like have a break from that. So yeah, it was an interesting factor, the rain. For sure.
The thunder is crazy. I remember some mornings, like I literally woke up out of a nightmare because I would hear the thunder in my sleep, and it literally sounded like cannon fire. Like I genuinely thought at some points when I was in that state between like sleep and wakingness, I literally thought I was gonna wake up in like a war zone, because it literally sounded like bombs exploding up in the air right above you. And the dorms that we slept in, they're very simple, but the roof was made out of this like corrugated aluminum. So I'm sure it wouldn't have been a good idea, or I'm sure it wouldn't have been a good thing if the thunder struck the dorm. But I didn't really think about that, honestly. I remember this one case though. I woke up like very anxious because I just heard thunderstorms the entire night, and I felt like something bad was gonna happen. Like I was supposed to go kayaking that day with one of the station coordinators, and I told her straight out, like, I didn't really refuse work, but that day I was like, I do not want to be out on the water right now, because I feel like a tree is gonna just get struck and like fall in the water and hit me. So no. But yeah, like the rain is tough because, like Melina said, it's not just a little drizzle, it soaks you. Like the one saving grace is that we're in a tropical environment, so you're not cold, but it's not nice, just being wet when like you're not, you don't want to be wet.
Yeah.
So other than that, was there anything else that was difficult to acclimate to? How did you find living with other people at the base?
That was cool. Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that. I guess what was the hardest thing for me, apart from the thunderstorms, was the physical work, because I was just continuously exhausted every single day. And when I woke up, so I would like go to bed at 5 in the morning, 5:30, and then I couldn't sleep past 10, or past 10, I couldn't sleep because it was either too hot or because people were being just loud outside. So I would go to have breakfast, and then sometimes I would be scheduled for an afternoon shift, and I would have to go, you're working again in the afternoon, and then have a little nap before dinner. So I don't know, from 4 to 5, and then have dinner, and then head out again. So that was really hard, I guess, the physical work. And also something that was also, I'm not complaining. It was just a tough part of the internship was the fact that we had to be out with absolutely no light. And sometimes we had full moon, and it was a beautiful night at the beach, and you could see so well, and we could work so well because of the full moon. You could see the turtles, you could do your work awesome, and it was perfect. But sometimes it was, number one, pouring rain, and number two, completely pitch black out on the beach. So, not only you're walking in the middle of darkness, but you're soaking wet, and there's also dogs around that want to come out and bite you. And there is debris. There is so much garbage in that beach. So I was very scared to step on something that could hurt me. And just, the fear of having poachers around that you wouldn't be able to know whether they're there or not. And then sometimes we had to go into the vegetation. So when it was very dark, I was scared to step on a snake. It was always on my mind. Stepping on a snake. I'm going to step on a snake. I'm going to step on a snake. So none of that happened. I think the station there and all the volunteers do a fantastic job at getting through all these challenges. But I remember thinking when we would go out to the beach when it was full moon, I remember always looking at the moon to try to guess how that night would go like. And when it was full moon, it was like that feeling of fear because that night was going to be amazing. But the night after, it was going to be pitch black. So that meant like, okay, the bad is coming. Like the hard days are coming again. And yeah, I guess that was a tough thing to navigate. But other than that, other than the actual field work and the physical work, there's nothing really that I can complain about. It was, yeah. I during my undergrad, I lived in a house with 16 people, so I guess living with other people wasn't an issue for me.
Okay, that's really great. I, on the other hand, had a lot of difficulty, like I said, adapting to the environment. But again, like you were saying, just like the amount of work, it's really tough. Like you're on your feet for a long time. And Melina briefly mentioned all the debris on the beach. It's important not to look past that because this beach wasn't one of those pristine tropical beaches that you see when you go on vacation. This beach was littered with debris. Like there were sticks of all shapes and sizes and sharpness that would just be washed in on the shore from the ocean. Not only that but there was a bunch of garbage. So it was really hard to just find your footing. Even during the day, it was hard to navigate, but I couldn't even imagine at night when you couldn't use your light and you only could rely on the light of the moon to be able to, walk around. I remember one case, like I did do night patrol like a few times near the end of the trip because that's when there weren't that many people around. So I volunteered to, pick up some slack. And within like halfway through the beach, we hadn't even gotten to the other side yet. I remember stepping on something and something sharp poked through my croc and pierced the bottom of my foot. Yeah. And I was in excruciating pain. I had to walk the rest of the length of the beach and back. And that took like a long time because we're obviously there and had to like hang out with the turtles and stuff. But it was so excruciatingly painful. And like, that was just that one experience for me.
Yeah. And I wanted to remind us, I just remember something that I guess was hard too was when the station flooded that we had to...
Oh, yeah, that was a wild time.
We had to relocate. That was hard to live with so many people in a tiny house. Yeah, we had to relocate to this small library in the community. Luckily, we were safe there because some people stayed at the station and was flooded and they had like crocodiles, like the caimans outside the kitchen swimming. And
So let's talk about what we're saying when the station flooded. So in Costa Rica, during the rainy season, obviously there's copious amounts of rain, and at some point, apparently it's a yearly thing, but almost the entire country floods. And it was particularly an issue where we were because our station was based right on the canal. Like it was a lowland area that was pretty, muddy and kind of flooded even on a good day. So when the water levels rose, at the first day I remember there was like about 2 feet of water. So they brought out the kayaks. So a couple of people at a time would be kayaked via taxi, kind of like a taxi service from the dorms to the kitchen and back. And we'd just have to be sitting on top of the windows or on the tables because the kitchen floor was basically flooded. And the water increased above that too, to the point where we had to evacuate a bunch of the volunteers. And we basically stayed for, what was it, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks on our station manager's property. She had like this little public library in the community. And this was a 400 square foot tiny little building. And it slept 10 people. We were just all on mattresses on the floor for 2 weeks. And
With a
initially,
toilet that didn't flush.
with what?
A toilet that didn't flush.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah, one toilet, 10 people, almost no running water for a couple of weeks straight. I genuinely thought that it was going to turn it into like a Lord of the Flies situation and we were all going to kill each other. But I don't know about you. Like, after the stress of the initial relocation, like, I found that time especially to be really relaxing because obviously a lot of our surveys were canceled because we couldn't access any areas. They were flooded. So it was the first time in months basically where we got to actually relax and hang out and enjoy ourselves there.
That is true. I also found that, and also like we got to play cards all together, which we never did because we were always working on a different schedules and we were tired. So that was great.
A great time to bond.
Yeah, but having a toilet that didn't flush placed an extreme amount of stress on me because it wouldn't flush. I don't know how other people made it happen, and it took so long for them to fix it. And also the internet in that place where we relocated, the internet was extremely spotty, and I always call my parents. You know, I am always in communications with them, but when we were there, it was really hard to talk to them, and yeah, that was the only bad part. But like you're saying, it also had a benefit to it, and yeah, I also felt a few days relaxed.
And so it's funny that you bring up your parents because I wanted to discuss like how was it dealing with, you know, being in that environment? Obviously you're going through all these tough situations, but how were your relationships like with people back home? Like, did you have any issues with connecting? Like, how was that all for you?
It wasn't. Yeah, we wouldn't speak as much as before because of this spotty internet, and I was on Instagram way less than I was able to be when I was living here before in Toronto. But I didn't have any issues. I guess, you know, I left home so long ago that my parents they were worried about me when that flooding happened, but it wasn't like a big change for me to be there because I don't see them anyways during the year.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was actually really difficult because, like I felt like I had a lot of FOMO during that time. Like, I definitely felt like I was missing out on a lot of things. Like, I debated for a couple of months, you know, before the internship started, whether I really wanted to do it. You know, like at first I saw the position online and I thought it would be a cool experience. But then once I actually got the position and was sent more information of like, this is what you're going to be doing, this is where you're going to be living, I was like, geez, like this sounds really tough. Like, do I really want to give up like my life in Canada, like put things on pause for 3 months to go to the jungle, like who knows where to do these things? Like, it was really tough for me. And especially since my two best friends during that time, they were traveling across Europe, and I was actually really resentful because here I am stewing in the jungle with all of my mosquito bites. My underwear is constantly wet. I am just, you know, really struggling, and I was really miserable for a long time. And yet they were, you know, traveling Spain or Barcelona and having fun and partying. And I kind of felt like I was just kind of resentful. And so I tried not to talk to them because I loved them. Like, I was happy for them. But I just was not able to appreciate my time there for a really long time. So it was just not good for me to be on social media or to see what other people were doing. Like, I really struggled with just like how difficult everything was. I feel like, I don't know if you picked up on this, but I felt like I was always getting in trouble because I wasn't doing anything right. Or, you know, even though we were surrounded by so many people, we were living with so many people from all over the world, very interesting, lovely characters. Like, I have nothing against anyone who was there. They were super nice and open and welcoming. But I was really lonely for a while at the beginning. Like, I just wasn't able to connect with others that well because it was just so hard that I kind of, you know, like I was in a really grouchy mood, like when I was out doing our tasks and stuff like that. And then when we got back to base, I was either sleeping or on the internet. Like, it took me, just really sitting down and like acknowledging my pain and emotions and not trying to avoid them, and reminding myself of why I was doing that in the first place. Like, that was what it took for me to actually start appreciating the experience. And then also, I think one of the biggest reasons why I couldn't, connect or appreciate for so long is I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like, they were, I don't know about you, but they were very strict with me on like protocol. Like, this is how you're going to do it. If you don't do something right, like, they will criticize you and tell you to do like it properly. And I understand that because we're doing scientific research. It has to be, standardized. We have to follow a protocol. That all makes sense. But like, I just felt like I was being criticized more than I was being appreciated. And it's not like I wanted like a pat on the back every day being like, good job. But like, if all you hear for the first 7 weeks is, criticisms of how you're doing something wrong, you start thinking that you're a fuck up. And like, that's kind of the mentality that I had. And it took me, stabbing my foot in the dark on the beach. And then the next day during our weekly meetings, I broke down, apologizing. I'm so sorry. Like, I can't work for a bit. Like, I can't move my foot. It just hurts too much. Like, I feel like such a fuck up. Like, I'm not like, I get it that you're like not a, I just felt like they didn't want me there, or like they were really disappointed in me. And like, it took the station manager to be like, Kat, like, you're doing a great job. Like, you don't have to, like, we appreciate your work. And like, after that moment, like, there was kind of a switch in me, and I actually started to be more comfortable and enjoy it. But like, it was really hard for me because I felt like there wasn't that much emotional support. Like, of course, everyone was struggling and we were talking about it, but at least from the station staff, I felt like that there wasn't really much emotional support there. Like, people there, you have to be tough, in that environment. But I felt like the people who were in charge, they were a little too hard, if you know what I mean.
Well, I definitely remember you having a switch. Yeah. I remember, and I think everybody felt it too, that all of a sudden you were just a different person, and you were like more secure about the work that you were doing, and you took initiative so many times. So yeah, I think it's what you're saying. I think it's that you had to be tough to be there. Like, there was no way around it. There was no chance for slacking. And I think that because we were all in the exact same boat, maybe that's why they didn't take the time to, to sit down with you and be like, okay, what's going on? Well, like, how can I help you? Because there's no way they can help you, because you have to do the work. I guess that's how I see it. Like, there's no way to do the work easier. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I think that's what placed a burden on us, the intensity of the work that we thought we were not prepared for.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it was, but again, like, I think it was really important to experience that, because it really taught me the value of hard work. And I don't know about you, but that place broke me so many times. But every single time I thought about it this way, like, this is so hard, it's so difficult to endure. But every time that, I'm broken, I feel like it was kind of like being the phoenix. I would crumble, but then I would rise from the ashes new and stronger. And kind of that process of the difficulty was kind of like a fire that burnt away all the weak portions of me. And each time I came back like stronger and more capable of doing the work. But it took a lot of introspection. I think for me, that's the biggest thing that I got from that experience. Like, it really did awaken my consciousness, not only to a lot of environmental issues and a lot of different ways of living, but also it opened my eyes to myself. I had to really ask myself, okay, why am I feeling this way? Like, what exactly about this situation is difficult? And what can I do to immediately reduce at least some unnecessary suffering? And I think that was really important, just having that mindset, being able to endure the pain, but also try to move past it. It was really difficult, and I don't think I really got how to do that until the very end, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez. But yeah, so I want to move past, all the difficulties. I want to know, like, what were your favorite moments of that experience? Because it was a really unique time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, yeah, for those of you who are listening, you may be scared at this point. You may
Yeah, we're not selling it for you guys. Conservation work is
maybe
hard.
thinking like, what the hell were you doing? But no, like, we did such, we did hard work, but it was also for me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, it was an incredible experience. And despite all these difficulties, the hard work, the thunderstorms, the lack of,
the lack of
time
sleep
to rest, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And it was just magical. And I guess thinking of my favorite part was when, I don't know, and this, I don't know if this happened or if this is just in my head, or if it happened and somehow my head transformed it into a more beautiful moment. But I just remember being so struck, like so amazed by the bioluminescent algae on the shell of the turtle. So I remember like seeing like a big, you can't really tell it's a turtle from afar. So I remember just thinking, is that a rock that it's moving and it's also
glowing?
Yeah, it's glowing blue. And I just remember, that memory, I have it on my mind. And I also remember how sometimes when I was working with the turtle and it was raining, when the drops would fall on the turtle's back, it would flash blue. And I was so like, wow, this is amazing. This is so beautiful. And I will never forget that feeling of how amazing is nature? How beautiful is this? What am I seeing? And it was glowing blue, and it was just a fantastic sight. And I guess that was my favorite part, but also just being surrounded by life, like what I already mentioned. It was so healing for me, and I just felt so like in place, and I felt so alive, and I felt like this is what the world is. Like, this is a world that I like. This is a world that I want to be in. I prefer this than being on the subway every day, than being, in the city. I love the city, but I prefer this so much more. So I guess, just being surrounded by life and my many different forms of life was awesome. And also, by how other people coexisted with those different forms of life. I remember these huge spiders that we would see inside the bathroom, in the kitchen, and then our station manager was like, "Yeah, they're just here. Then it's fine. We don't kill them here." And they were just huge, and they would be hanging out in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, I actually remember that. Like, basically, how the setup is: are there these dorms, and outside the dorm is like a little patio area with a walkway up to the washer, the toilets, and then on the patio there was a little sink, and right above the sink there were these huge spider webs with these giant, prickly looking spiders. And as the months went by, like, the webs just got bigger and bigger, and there were more spiders, and it was really beautiful. And I do agree with you. It's funny how you said, just with all the life. I remember during that time, I disliked the experience so much, and I remember telling myself, like, I hate field work. I never want to do this kind of stuff again. I would prefer to just, be in a building or do something like more political or whatever. But looking back at that experience, like the moment that I like came back to Canada, and like ever since then, as I reminisce about that time, I have such a different outlook on things. Like I actually now consider it a really positive experience. Like I think about that time and it was so magical. And now it's kind of like a switch, because I actually prefer and want to pursue more field work. And now I look at this concrete jungle and I am so dissatisfied with being here. And like you said, like I want to be where there's more life forms. Like I honestly am kind of tired of seeing this many humans. I want to be in a place where there's less humans, you know? And one of my favorite experiences during that time was I love kayaking, so I enjoyed the kayak surveys the most. And like being on the water in the canals was so beautiful because there are these like rich, luscious trees all around. It almost looked like something out of Jurassic Park. And paddling through the water, you're just gliding. And there was only one time that I saw an otter, but it was the most amazing experience. We just finished surveying this one log at Tortuguero National Park. And I remember having to get out of the kayak to pee. So I just peed on that log. And then I got it back into the kayak. And then my friend who was there doing the survey with me, she, hushed me. She's like, look, there are two otters in the water. So, we see their heads pop up. And one of them jumps out of the water and goes onto the log that just, that I was just on. It probably smelled my pee. It was like, okay, that's not my territory anymore. And it jumped out. I think I have a video of that, but I was like, that was the best time of my life because I love otters. So it was a great time because it was my favorite activity and my favorite animal all at once. And I really miss being on the water, honestly. I think that's one of the biggest things that I miss about that place. And just seeing all the unique wildlife. Like, it's interesting because I actually saw more dead creatures than I did living ones. Especially after the flood, were a lot of dead creatures on the beach. Like, there was actually a cow that washed out.
Oh, yeah, I always see the cow.
Remember that? That was an interesting time because I would do like the beach surveys and like you would kind of just see the different rates of decomposition and like the vultures coming in and stuff. And there was like an electrocuted tamandua at one time, a lot of different, animals. Obviously, I'd prefer to see them living, but it was really interesting. That was the only animals that I could see up close, unfortunately.
So the tamandua, I remember, and there was a little caiman too that they cut their tail because apparently they eat their tails. Yeah.
The locals?
Yeah. That's what I was told. And he was dead on the beach. Yeah, I remember. That was so sad.
Speaking of caimans, do you remember Guancho?
Juancho. Yeah. Yeah. Our station's caiman.
Yeah. We had a big fat caiman that hung around the docks by the station, and we would always throw our food scraps in the water to like decompose it. So that caiman got really nice and fat, very well fed, I would say.
Yeah.
And I heard that there was this other story that there was this like little kid from the town that was like, fucking around with one of these like little baby caimans, and apparently its mother came by and like ate the kid. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, I remember that story too.
So how do you what did you think about the locals and the relationship that, not only the organization had with them, but also just their relationship with the the nature itself? Because it was a very interesting thing, at least for me, to observe.
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't get to be too much with the locals. I wish I could have done more environmental education, but from the time that I got to be in their town, it's a difficult question because they have a lot of limitations in terms that education there, they don't have a proper education system. They are not, I believe they are not considered an established jurisdiction, and that's why the Costa Rican government doesn't provide any form of waste collection. So they have to bury their own garbage there. And it's just very difficult. And I believe that the people that are poachers, a lot of the times, and this is just me guessing, but a lot of the times it may be because they have no other choice. Yeah. Like there are not many opportunities there for them to succeed. And it's a beautiful little town, and I remember admiring them, and everyone is so lovely, but at the same time I was touched by the lack of proper conditions to live to have a different type of livelihood, because a lot of the times it was just difficult to just say, okay, yeah, you're a butcher and you're a bad person, and it's just not. It's not just that. Like a lot goes into somebody deciding to kill a turtle that's endangered. So it brings up mixed feelings.
Yeah, I personally never judged the people living there or their lifestyle, because I knew like they didn't have any other options. Like this was a small, unofficial population, because I guess it was like a protected area. So, the kind of rule is you're not allowed to build like property there. However, if you do build property, like a lot of people would gather materials and within 3 days just build some kind of like shack basically. But once there was some kind of building, the authorities weren't allowed to come by and destroy it. So in that kind of way, they kind of got around the whole thing of not being able to live in that area. But again, because it wasn't an official recognized establishment, there wasn't that many resources or infrastructure for them. This is a small, isolated population on a canal and in the northwest province of Limon. Like there wasn't really much economic opportunities for them, right? Like there was a little hotel like on the other side of the beach that kind of did was part of like the territory that we were studying in, and some of the locals were hired there, but their rates were really small. Like what they were getting like $12 a day or something. Like it was very difficult to live off of that. So a lot of people did supplement by using the local resources. One of them were turtle eggs. People liked eating them. And the way that I saw it is it kind of brought this anecdote that I heard from one of my ecology classes. It's the idea that, conservationists may come around and try to convince the local people, say in India, to protect the Bengal tiger population because it's endangered.
But I taught that article. Maybe we're talking about the same article.
But the locals, why would the locals do that if those exact creatures are the ones that are coming onto their property, killing their cattle, taking their resources, and not giving them the opportunity to, live, have a livelihood, and to thrive? Like they have to think about their own needs and their family's needs. So that obviously for the individual is a priority over conservationists. So even though we may have more information of the grand scheme of things and how these other organisms are important, but like, how are you expecting local people to get behind that and support you if those exact animals that you're trying to protect are in direct conflict with the survivability of those people? At the end of the day, we live for ourselves, so our needs have to be met. But if those needs are not met by, the larger social institutions like the government, then local people like those have to look elsewhere, like they.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what's called sometimes, I'm not saying this is the case for Costa Rica, but sometimes that type of conservation, it's called the exclusionary approach, in which conservation frameworks are established without including local communities. And that creates a problem because, as you said, local communities, their livelihoods are intrinsically related to the natural resources from that area. So when conservation doesn't take into consideration the needs of local people, it's less likely to succeed. You have to work in collaboration. So
yeah, I think the way that the station COTERC approached that problem was really good, with in terms of the hands-off approach. Like the poachers knew us and we knew them, and I would see them on the beach in the morning, and we were very cordial, but there was that I guess there was that like peaceful and hands-off approach, but at times it could get serious. Like when we were on our station manager's property in the library, she had multiple dogs. One of them was like a guard dog that would literally attack you and probably like rip your throat out if it got the chance. And it had to be tied up in a corner. I remember one time she sent us all a text. I won't forget this. She was like, "Oh yeah, guys, make sure you stay away from that side of the property. You know, my dog gets really upset when she sees people that she can't kill." And that sounds really callous. Like, why do you have such a dog? But it was a necessity because our station manager was literally like constantly getting death threats from the local people because obviously her work was undermining their ability to poach. So
Yeah.
Even though I would say our relationship was very peaceful on the surface, there was an underlying tension that, you know, we all felt, and we had to try as, you know, representatives of that organization to make sure that we, you know, follow those politics and we don't get involved. You know, we're there to do the work. Sometimes, you know, a part of the organization is social outreach. There was that library to educate the local school children and really get them involved in conservation. But yeah, there were a lot of issues that, you know, we just weren't capable of helping them with, like plastic being a really big one. Do you want to talk about the plastic issue on that beach?
Yeah. So, yeah, as we mentioned earlier, it is a very, very polluted beach. And like a lot of the times we would walk on plastics rather than on sand because of the amount of garbage that there was there. And the thing is that in that 3 Mile beach, approximately 12 or 15 people were living there. So we believe, and it's almost for sure, that that amount of garbage wasn't a result of locals just littering. A lot of it could have come from the Tortuguero River because that beach was at the river mouth of this main river that covers a number of different communities, and also a lot of it could have come just from the ocean and from neighboring countries. We were looking at while we were there, we were serving the type of plastics that we encountered, and a lot of the materials weren't recognized by the station manager as being local. So a lot of it would have possibly come from other countries.
Yeah.
So that was very worrying. And of course, that posed a threat for marine turtles because they are already vulnerable to poachers and to other predators. But if they get entangled in fishing ropes or in other types of debris, that poses an additional threat for them, and they're already endangered. So yeah, it was a very big problem. And as I mentioned, I believe it's not, because it's not an established jurisdiction, that area, the Costa Rican government doesn't provide them with the option to dispose of their waste correctly. So they have no choice. I saw them so many times burning their garbage, and that's not also toxic for the environment, but for them too. Whatever, you don't want to be burning plastics because that's emitting toxic chemicals in the air. So
and not only that, but those toxic chemicals are also in the waterways, because the issue with plastic is it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't break down. Like there were multiple times where we did some plastic surveys and collecting plastic. We did our best to clean the beach, but there was only so much that we could do. For example, like every single day during the morning surveys, we were told to bring 2 garbage bags and fill them up with water bottles. And each day we had to clean up a different section of the beach, so every 100-meter area. And like, I'm not even joking, you don't even have to use the entire 100-meter area. You could just pick like a 10-meter radius, and you would fill the garbage bags within 10 minutes. That's how polluted there was of plastic items. And I remember we did an audit of those plastic items to see where they were coming from. And I remember seeing packaging that was from, you know, Mexico, other places in Central and South America, but even places as far away as China and Japan and Egypt. I even found a bottle of water that was bottled in London, Ontario, which is really close to where we live. And I think that one above all hit me the most because it made me realize that, you know, that very well could have been my own plastic. You know, I don't really use plastic water bottles, but like thinking about other plastic items that I throw away, like you think that they go into landfills, but the waste disposal system is a very leaky system. There's a lot of opportunities for things to slip through the cracks, or during storms to be washed away into the ocean and end up places hundreds and thousands of kilometers away, like in Costa Rica. So it is a really huge issue because as that plastic breaks down, it becomes smaller and smaller. Like, I remember one of our interns, she did a survey of the sand to see how many plastic particles are in that. And that was a significant degree. And the thing is once it gets that small, it can enter the waterways and it can enter our own systems and cause so much havoc because those toxic chemicals are then being leached into our own bodies. So that's where issues such as biomagnification and bioaccumulation come in. Like, we're literally, not only are we harming other organisms like marine life who either get entangled in it or accidentally ingest this plastic, but we ourselves are being poisoned by it without even knowing it.
Yeah, and then when we ingest these plastic particles that have been ingested by fish, for example, then they can act as endocrine disruptors. So they can mimic, they can mess with our hormonal activity, and it is definitely a human health issue.
And when we're talking about messing with our hormonal activity, we're talking about issues that can arise, such as infertility, such as issues with like the survivability of infants, or even your own growth in the long term. Like, it is a really serious thing. And to me, I think that horrified me the most because during that time, I was trained to see plastic, like even though it's all around us here, like we don't really notice it. But then once I came back, like I noticed it everywhere, not just on our shelves, but even in our own environments. Like, I never considered, Toronto or Mississauga to be that polluted of a place, like we have a good waste disposal system. But I go out to these green areas and there's so much litter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it actually upsets me so much. Like at some point, like I think cognitive dissonance did actually switch in, and I started kind of ignoring it because like you can only be so conscious without it like overwhelming you. Yeah. And that's something that like I think I took away, like that's one thing that I took away from that experience, just the how big of an issue plastic pollution is. But yeah, for me, that's what I took away from that trip. Like I'm really passionate about that, and I'm still trying to figure out what I can do, but that is something that I really want to focus on. So what about you, Melina? Like, how was it like first coming back? Like what were the things you were experiencing? Like, what were there any like changes in your thought patterns or perception after coming back from that trip?
I actually can think of one. Because of the, just of the awareness of being surrounded by different forms of life, I think I was already in tune with this thought and respectful of other forms of life, but I think I wasn't enough. I didn't have a
deep enough.
Like my awareness wasn't at the highest. And when I came back, I feel like it was. So for example, if I see a house spider in my house, I'd be like, hey buddy, how's it going? Great. And then I would just, keep my day going. Before I'd be like, oh my God, there's a spider. Let me take it out safely. And I'm going to take it and I put it in a container and I put it outside my house because, this is my house. The spider shouldn't be here. But now I am past that point. I'm like, the spider's not doing anything to me. If he wants to be living here with me, sure, there's absolutely no problem as long as it doesn't hurt me. Yeah. And I think that was a big thing that, it was a switch in my mind that when I came back, I just realized, why can't we just live together in harmony? And it was a switch.
I actually remembered, like, don't be that hard on yourself, because I remember even during that time, like, we traveled together, and my automatic response when there was like a bug on me or near me was like, I just smack it, kill it, like no second thought. It was just an automatic process. But I remember you calling me out so much about that. You're like, why'd you do that? Like, it wasn't doing anything. And I'm like, at that time, I was really annoyed with you because I'm like, chill, it's just a bug, like it was bothering me, right? But like now, because you made me so aware of it, I am more like conscious and thoughtful. Like sometimes, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I still smack them without thinking. Like I'm not a perfect human being. Okay. Like
you're working on it.
I'm working on it, but I am more conscious, and like you, I'm more comfortable with the idea of coexisting, and I'm more comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable and being dirty and being out in the wild. Like since coming back, like even yesterday I was going for a walk, and I didn't like being on the path. Like I went up in the hills, I was like in the bushes getting scratched, like I went through the river, like literally my shoes and socks and pants were wet. I like slipped in the water, got all muddy, and I just laughed it off. Like my underwear got wet and I didn't get upset, and I would consider that growth. So like it was a really great experience, and it's interesting how things that you hate in the moment, that you think you can't overcome, and that you think you like don't ever want to do again, end up being the exact thing that you want to pursue afterwards. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's so funny to hear about your growth. Happy to hear that.
Yeah, but it's also interesting because in some ways I do feel like a better person for doing that experience. Like I think that was like a really essential point in my life to make me understand what I value, who I want to be, and like what I want to do. And I like remember I looked through my journal entry right after I came back, and I was talking about how like powerful I felt because I was able to be conscious of my attitude, my perceptions, and how I was feeling, and I was able to regulate my emotions really well right after coming back. But in a way, I feel like over the past 2 years, I've kind of regressed. Like I've kind of fallen back into the same habits. Like obviously I've picked up new habits. Like I'm a lot more environmentally conscious, and I'm trying to pursue a zero waste lifestyle, and I like being out in the woods and all that. So that's changed, but in many ways, like it's hard because I've fallen somewhat into the same patterns of consumption. And it's hard here because, just like over there, they don't have other options for waste disposal. Over here, sometimes we don't have other options for, the products we consume. Of course, we have a lot more, but it does require personal sacrifice because, zero waste options are not that accessible everywhere. Like, especially I find eating out, like I would bring my own containers, but a lot of places would refuse to put the food in there because it was a safety risk. But I'm thinking like, I didn't shit in my container. Like what are you trying to do? Just like cover your asses so you don't get sued? Like no one is going to get sick from this. Like why? You're either telling me that I have to buy your product wrapped in all of this plastic that's just going to be thrown away immediately afterwards, or not use your service because I can't do it sustainably.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's difficult. So what about you? What have you been up to in the 2 years since our trip together?
Well, I finished my master's, and then I started teaching at college, at Centennial College.
Congratulations. I'm so proud of you.
Now I'm going to start my second semester in the summer. I'm going to teach the same course again.
Yeah.
It's called Environment, Energy, and Sustainable Development. So it's relevant to everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started working at Ontario Nature as well as the communications coordinator. And yeah, that's my plan, is to continue on my professional path. Finally, I feel like this is what I was meant to be doing. So I'm happy.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think one of the things that I love most about that experience is connecting with so many other people that are passionate about like biology and the environment and conservation. Like I love my friends, we're close, but every time I like talk about something sciencey, they're always like, "Oh, here we go again." So it was nice just being in an environment where I can geek out about these kind of things. And I really love that, I've met people like you, and knowing that we're in the same kind of working environment. Like I'm so grateful that we have environmental leaders like you and I here, because I think that especially you've already made so much of a difference with your courses and with this nature. What was it? Ontario nature position. So I know you're going to do great things, and I know that I will too. Like that experience has definitely influenced what I want to do. I definitely want to be out in the wild and really understand the relationship between organisms. I want to understand what organisms we have on this earth, and how we connect to them, and how we can take care of them, and how we can live our lives, like you were saying, cohabitation in a way that both of us can persist in the long term. And I think to do that, it's really important to raise the ecological literacy of everyone around. Like I think like part of the obstacle is that, these kind of conversations are not being held in the public space. Like I don't know about you, but I don't really talk about, plastic pollution. I don't really hear much about it other than in my like own little ecological circles. So for me, it's really important to share my message and share these stories with you guys to inspire you and just get you thinking about this, because if it's really hard to connect when you're not in that kind of situation, but it's important nonetheless to, share those messages with others to try to get them to understand this kind of issue. And I don't know about you, but I would encourage everyone to just go out there and work in the field, because it changes your perspective on a lot of things, and it will change your perspective of how you live your life on a daily basis, what it is you value. Like the one thing that I love about Costa Rica is their pura vida mentality. Like that's kind of like their national phrase. Over there, they say like pura vida, which means like, hey, how are you? Have a great day. But when I was there, like I took that literally, like pure life. When we were there, we were so far away from this urban consumerist lifestyle where we're constantly inundated by the media with advertising and these messaging about what we're supposed to care about and what doesn't matter. Like it was just, I found it very manipulative, and it kind of makes you lose focus of what's really important. So it was really great being in that environment, stepping away from everything that's going on here and seeing a different perspective, because I truly came back here with new eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It was a life changing trip.
Well, I'm so glad that we got to experience that together. Thank you for sharing your story and being a part of my story.
Thanks to you for having me on.
Absolutely. This will definitely not be the last time that we hear from you. I know you'll do great things in this life. To wrap this up, we want to just talk more about the organization in specific that we volunteered for, and give you information about them if you're interested in supporting them either on site in the field or financially, so that they could continue on their work. So Melina, after you.
Yes, so again, they are called COTERC, Canadian Organization for Tropical Education and Rainforest Conservation. You can go there. You don't need to have any type of experience. You can go there. I think the minimum it's 1 week, and you can stay there.
I believe it's 2 weeks actually.
2 weeks.
2 weeks commitment minimum.
We had this an intern. He was there just for 1 week.
Okay.
Anyways, I can't remember, but we highly encourage you to go. I believe, you pay a package, and it's what, 100 and I can't remember. You need to check the site.
I think it's about $200 US a week, but that includes your stay, like your lodging, your food, like they cook delicious things for you. You don't have to worry about that. And obviously the fee to help run the station is all included with that.
Yeah, and right now, because they have been highly affected by the COVID-19 and the lack of tourism, they have a GoFundMe page, which can link at the end of the video. And please, if you feel like supporting, if you're able to, we're sure that they would really appreciate it. They really do important work for conservation.
And if you've enjoyed this video, guys, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will leave the information. I will leave Melina's information in the description if you want to check her out, if you want to check out her work. And with that, goodbye. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Goodbye.